The massive space station hung in the dark void between stars like a city made of crystal and metal. Inside its gleaming halls, representatives from 47 different alien species gathered around a circular table that could have fit a small building. This was the Galactic Council, the governing body that had kept peace across 3 spiral arms of the galaxy for over 2,000 years. Admiral Kethtar of the Zilani species stood at the head of the table, his forearms moving across holographic displays with practiced ease. His people were known throughout the galaxy for their logical minds and careful planning. Today he had troubling news to share with the Council. "Honored representatives," Kethtar began, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber's translation systems. "Our frontier scouts have discovered a new species on the outer rim of the Orion Spiral. The planet is mostly water, with several large landmasses. The inhabitants call themselves humans." A murmur ran through the assembled aliens. New species were rare these days. Most worlds capable of supporting intelligent life had been found and welcomed into the Council centuries ago. Ambassador Velshan of the Etherian species leaned forward in her floating chair. Her people were famous diplomats, tall and graceful, with skin that seemed to shimmer like water. "What is their technological level, Admiral? Have they achieved spaceflight?" Kethtar's expression grew darker. "That is the concerning part, Ambassador. They have barely reached their own moon. Their technology is primitive by our standards. They still use chemical rockets and kinetic weapons. But the real problem is not their technology. It is their behavior." The Admiral activated a large holographic display in the center of the room. Images of Earth appeared showing cities, forests, and oceans. Then the images changed to show something that made several Council members gasp in shock. "They are constantly at war," Kethtar continued. "Our monitoring stations have intercepted thousands of their broadcasts. In just the last 100 of their years, they have fought 2 massive global conflicts. They have created weapons capable of destroying their entire planet. They have divided their world into nearly 200 separate nations, many of which are hostile to each other." Councillor Morfak of the Granite People, whose species looked like walking mountains, slammed one massive fist on the table. "Savages. How did such a violent species survive long enough to develop technology?" "That is exactly what makes them dangerous," Kethtar replied. "They have turned warfare into a science. Every conflict makes them stronger, more advanced. They learn from each battle and improve their weapons. Our analysts believe that within a few hundred years they could pose a serious threat to peaceful worlds." Ambassador Velshan studied the images carefully. She had spent centuries dealing with difficult species, helping them join galactic civilization. "What do you recommend, Admiral?" "Standard pacification protocols," Kethtar said without hesitation. "We offer them membership in the Council under our protection. If they refuse, we demonstrate our superior technology until they see reason. Most primitive species choose peace when they understand they cannot win." The debate that followed lasted for hours. Some Council members argued for immediate military action. Others suggested waiting and watching. A few brave voices suggested trying peaceful contact first. But in the end, the decision was unanimous, as it always was in the Council. "Very well," announced High Chancellor Zexthul, the ancient leader of the energy beings who had founded the Council. His voice sounded like wind through crystals. "We will extend an invitation to these humans. Ambassador Velshan, you will lead the diplomatic mission. Admiral Kethtar, you will provide appropriate military support." "How many ships will you need?" asked Velshan. Kethtar considered the question. The humans had primitive weapons, no space fleet, and were divided among themselves. They would likely surrender as soon as they saw what they were facing. 3 dreadnoughts should be sufficient, he decided. "Standard intimidation formation. We will position them at the edge of their solar system. When they see the size and power of our ships, they will understand that resistance is pointless." The Council members nodded in agreement. It was a proven strategy that had worked on dozens of worlds before. Show overwhelming force, offer generous terms, and wait for the inevitable surrender. As the Council session ended, various species began making their preparations. The Etherians prepared their most elegant diplomatic vessel, a ship that looked more like a work of art than a spacecraft. The Zilani loaded their dreadnoughts with their most impressive weapons, though they expected to use none of them. Admiral Kethtar remained behind, studying the data on humans more carefully. Something about these creatures bothered him, though he could not identify what. They were clearly primitive. Their largest weapons could barely scratch the armor of a Council scout ship. Their fastest vessels would take centuries to reach the nearest star, yet something in their history troubled him. Other species that the Council had encountered developed war as a necessity for survival. They fought when they had to for resources or territory, but humans seemed to fight for other reasons that Kethtar could not understand. They fought for ideas, for beliefs, sometimes for no reason that made sense to logical minds. He pulled up more of their historical records. In one image, he saw humans charging across an open field directly into enemy fire, dying by the thousands for a few meters of muddy ground. In another, he watched them sail across vast oceans in wooden ships to fight enemies they had never met. They seemed to treat warfare not just as a tool, but as something else entirely. Kethtar shook his head and closed the files. He was overthinking the situation. These humans were trapped on a single world with primitive technology. 3 Council dreadnoughts carried enough firepower to turn their planet into dust. Even the most warlike species became reasonable when faced with impossible odds. The preparation took 2 weeks. Ambassador Velshan's ship was loaded with translation equipment, cultural gifts, and detailed offers of Council membership. The 3 dreadnoughts were fueled and armed, their crews briefed on standard pacification procedures. Backup fleets were placed on standby, though no one expected them to be needed. As the small fleet prepared to enter hyperspace, Admiral Kethtar reviewed the mission parameters one final time. Arrive at the edge of the human solar system. Send the standard diplomatic message. Wait for the humans to respond with either submission or defiance. If they chose defiance, demonstrate the power of 1 dreadnought by destroying an uninhabited moon or asteroid. Watch the humans reconsider their position. It was a routine that had played out countless times before. The Council's records showed a 97% success rate. Most species chose peace when they understood the alternative. The fleet jumped into hyperspace, carrying with them the weight of galactic authority and the certainty that they were bringing civilization to another backward world. None of them suspected that their arrival at Earth would change everything they thought they knew about warfare, technology, and the true nature of intelligence in the galaxy. In the depths of space, the Council ships raced toward Earth, confident in their mission and certain of their success. Behind them, the Galactic Council continued its daily business, already planning the welcome ceremonies for their newest members. None of them had bothered to ask the most important question: what if they were wrong about everything? Ambassador Velshan's elegant ship dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the human solar system, like a silver needle threading through black cloth. Behind her, 3 massive Zilani dreadnoughts emerged from the void, their hulls bristling with weapons that could crack planets. The formation was designed to inspire awe and fear in equal measure. Begin standard first contact protocols. Velshan ordered her communications officer, a young Etherian named Silthak, who had never participated in a pacification mission before. The ambassador's ship moved gracefully toward the inner system, broadcasting the Council's standard greeting. Mathematical sequences flowed out in all directions, followed by simple pictographs showing the universal symbols of peace, trade, and cooperation. It was the same message the Council had sent to dozens of primitive worlds over the centuries. Admiral Kethtar watched from the bridge of his flagship, the Inevitable Justice. His tactical displays showed the primitive human world spinning peacefully in the distance, unaware of the momentous choice that was about to be placed before them. Have they responded to our message? He asked his communications team. Not yet, Admiral, replied his second-in-command, Lieutenant Vextar. But our sensors are detecting increased activity on their world. Multiple radio transmissions, satellite movements, and what appears to be military mobilization. Kethtar nodded with satisfaction. Fear was the appropriate response. The humans were clearly preparing to surrender, probably arguing among themselves about who would have the honor of speaking for their entire species. But as the hours passed, something strange began to happen. Instead of the chaotic panic that usually followed first contact, the human communications networks fell completely silent. Their primitive satellites stopped broadcasting entertainment signals. Their military forces moved with purpose, but in ways that made no sense to the watching aliens. Admiral, Vextar said, his voice carrying a note of confusion, the humans have responded to our message. Excellent. Patch it through. The response was brief. transmitted in perfect mathematical sequences that showed the humans understood the Council's greeting, but the content was unlike anything in the Council's first contact protocols. "We'll get back to you." Kethtar stared at the message display for several long moments. "That's it?" "Yes, Admiral. Just those 5 words." On Earth, the response to the alien arrival was unlike anything the Council had ever witnessed. Within minutes of the first detection, every major space agency had triangulated the position of the alien ships. The United Nations Security Council convened an emergency session, but there were no screaming crowds in the streets, no mass panic, no desperate attempts to flee the planet. Instead, there was an eerie calm that settled over the world's military installations. Bases that had been quiet for decades suddenly came alive with activity. Deep underground facilities that didn't appear on any public maps began powering up systems that had been dormant for years. Dr. Sarah Chen, director of the recently revealed Earth Defense Force, stood in a command center that officially didn't exist, watching displays that showed the approaching alien ships. Around her, technicians worked with quiet efficiency, their faces showing concentration rather than fear. "Status report," she ordered. "All defensive platforms are online," reported Colonel Martinez, her second-in-command. "Lunar installations are reporting ready status. The asteroid belt stations are in position and awaiting orders. What about the fleet?" "Hidden and ready, Doctor. The aliens show no sign of detecting our ships." Dr. Chen nodded with satisfaction. Humanity had been preparing for this moment for longer than most people realized. Not since the first radio signals were detected from deep space. Not since the first evidence of faster-than-light travel was discovered in cosmic background radiation. They had been preparing since the moment they realized they were not alone. Aboard the inevitable Justice, Admiral Kethtar was growing increasingly uncomfortable with the human response. His sensors showed military activity across the planet, but it was unlike anything in their database of primitive species reactions. "They're not running," observed Lieutenant Vextar. "Most species either surrender immediately or descend into chaos. These humans are doing neither." "Perhaps they don't understand the situation," suggested Communications Officer Nalthar. "Their technology is primitive. They may not realize what they're facing." But Kethtar was not convinced. Something about the human response felt wrong. Their communications had shifted to encrypted quantum channels that the Council couldn't penetrate. Their satellites were moving in coordinated patterns that suggested a level of organization impossible for a divided species. Most disturbing of all, several objects that the Council had assumed were primitive space stations were now moving under their own power. "Lieutenant," Kethtar ordered, "conduct a more detailed scan of the human system. I want to know the location and capabilities of every piece of technology they possess." The results of the scan made the Admiral's blood run cold. What they had assumed were primitive satellites were actually sophisticated monitoring stations with technology that shouldn't have existed. The humans hadn't just detected the Council's arrival. They had been tracking ships in hyperspace for light years before they emerged into normal space. "Admiral," Vextar said quietly, "some of these readings don't make sense. The humans appear to have mastered technologies that most Council species consider theoretical. Ambassador Velshan's ship had reached Earth's orbit by now, but instead of the frightened planet she expected to find, her sensors detected something that made her doubt her readings. Military installations that had been invisible from long range were now clearly visible up close. Facilities that extended deep underground, weapons platforms that operated on principles her science teams couldn't identify, and most shocking of all, ships. "How many vessels do they have?" she asked her tactical officer. "We're not sure, Ambassador. Our sensors are detecting massive artificial structures throughout their solar system, but many of them are hidden in ways that suggest technology far beyond what we observed from long range." The breakthrough came when Earth finally sent its official response, 12 hours after the first contact message. This time, the transmission came not from the planet's surface, but from a ship that simply appeared next to Ambassador Velshan's vessel, without any detectable method of propulsion. "This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the Earth Defense Force," came the voice in perfect galactic standard, a language that should have taken years for primitive minds to understand. "We appreciate your visit to our system. Before we discuss your proposal, we would like to invite you to observe a cultural exchange demonstration. We believe you will find it educational." Admiral Kethtar felt a chill run down his spine. Cultural exchange was diplomatic language for a military demonstration. In his experience, primitive species only made such requests when they were too ignorant to understand how outmatched they were. But something in Admiral Chen's tone suggested she understood the situation perfectly. "Very well," Ambassador Velshan replied, her diplomatic training taking over despite her growing unease. "We would be honored to observe your cultural practices." "Excellent," Chen responded. "We'll meet you in the asteroid belt in 6 hours. Please feel free to bring any observers you think might benefit from the demonstration." As the transmission ended, Admiral Kethtar realized that everything the Council thought they knew about humans might be completely wrong. The question was, how wrong were they, and what would it cost them to find out? The asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter had never looked so crowded. Admiral Kethtar stood on the bridge of the inevitable justice, watching his tactical displays with growing concern. What should have been empty space was filled with contacts that his sensors couldn't properly identify. "How many ships are we detecting?" he asked his tactical officer. "That's the problem, Admiral. We're not sure what we're seeing. The humans appear to have been using some kind of stealth technology. Objects we thought were asteroids are now revealing themselves to be artificial constructs." Ambassador Velshan's ship hung nearby, its elegant line seeming fragile next to the growing mass of human vessels appearing throughout the belt. She had requested permission to record the demonstration for the Council archives, expecting to document another primitive species making threats with crude weapons they didn't understand how to use properly. Instead, she was watching the most sophisticated military operation she had ever witnessed. "Ambassador," her science officer reported, his voice tight with disbelief. "We're detecting energy signatures that shouldn't be possible. Some of these human ships are operating on principles our best theoretical physicists said were impossible. The human fleet that revealed itself was unlike anything in Council records. The ships seemed to bend light around themselves, making them difficult to target or even properly observe. They moved with impossible precision, as if the laws of physics were merely suggestions rather than absolute rules." "Admiral Sarah," Chen's voice came across the communication channel with the calm professionalism of someone completely in control of the situation. "Council representatives, thank you for agreeing to this demonstration. We believe cultural exchange is important for building mutual understanding." Kethtar activated his communication system. "Admiral Chen, while we appreciate your enthusiasm, I should point out that the Council has protocols for military demonstrations. Perhaps we could arrange something less elaborate?" Chen's laugh was warm, but carried an edge that made several Council officers step back from their stations. "Admiral Kethtar, with respect, you came to our system with 3 dreadnoughts and demands for surrender. The least we can do is show you what you're actually dealing with." The demonstration began with a single human destroyer, a sleek vessel roughly half the size of a Council frigate. It moved toward a large asteroid, taking position at what would normally be considered extreme weapons range. "This is our standard ship-to-ship ammunition," Chen explained calmly. "We call it a singularity lance. It's nothing special by our standards, but we thought you might find it interesting." The destroyer fired. There was no visible beam, no missile trail, no explosion. The asteroid simply ceased to exist. Not destroyed, not broken apart, not vaporized. One moment it was there, a solid chunk of rock and metal several kilometers across. The next moment there was nothing but empty space. The silence on the Council ships was deafening. "Impossible," whispered Lieutenant Vextar. "That asteroid had a mass of several billion tons. Where did it go?" Admiral Chen's voice remained cheerfully conversational. "Oh, it's still there, technically. Just in a different dimensional frame. We find it's much cleaner than traditional explosives. No debris field to navigate around afterward." Admiral Kethtar stared at his tactical displays, trying to process what he had just witnessed. The Council's most powerful weapons could destroy that asteroid, but it would take sustained fire from multiple ships and would leave dangerous debris scattered across thousands of kilometers. The humans had made it simply disappear with a single shot from their smallest warship. "How?" Ambassador Velshan asked, her diplomatic composure finally cracking. "How is that possible?" "Physics is really more of a guideline than a rule," Chen replied. "We learned that during our first real war. You see, humans have this habit of breaking things that other species consider unbreakable. Laws, barriers, the fundamental constants of reality. We're very good at it." The second demonstration involved cyber warfare. Chen's voice took on the tone of a teacher explaining a simple concept to confuse students. Now, this next demonstration might seem a bit invasive, but we want to make sure you understand our capabilities. Without any visible signal or transmission, every system on every council ship simply stopped working. Life support, navigation, weapons, communications, even the lights went out. Emergency power kicked in after a few terrifying seconds. But the message was clear. The humans had taken control of their entire fleet without effort. "Don't worry," Chen said as the council ship systems came back online. "We're not keeping any of your data. Well, except for your military specifications, diplomatic protocols, and complete tactical database. But that's just professional courtesy. We like to know who we're dealing with." Admiral Kethtar looked at his tactical officer with growing horror. "How much did they take?" "Everything, Admiral. Complete system penetration in under 30 seconds. They bypassed security measures that took our best technicians decades to develop. It's as if our encryption simply didn't exist." Ambassador Velshan was frantically trying to contact the Council, but her communications were being blocked by interference that her technicians couldn't identify or counter. For the first time in her long diplomatic career, she was completely cut off from the civilization she represented. The third demonstration was the most unsettling. Admiral Chen invited the Council representatives to examine human military history, which had been uploaded directly to their databases during the cyber attack. "We thought you might want to understand our background," Chen explained. "See, most species develop military technology out of necessity. They fight when they have to, for resources or survival. Humans are different. We fight because we're good at it." The data that flowed across Council screens told a story that no peaceful species could comprehend. 10,000 years of continuous warfare, conflicts that spanned continents and lasted for generations. Weapons designed not just to kill, but to terrorize, to break the will of entire civilizations. But most disturbing was the progression. Each war had driven rapid technological advancement. Each defeat had led to innovation. Each victory had provided lessons for the next conflict. Humans didn't just learn from their mistakes. They turned those mistakes into evolutionary pressure that made them deadlier. "Admiral," Vextar reported, his voice barely above a whisper, "according to this data, humans have never had a period longer than 50 years without major warfare somewhere on their planet. They've been continuously at war for their entire recorded history." Kethtar felt something he had never experienced in decades of military service. Genuine fear. Not fear of death, which was an occupational hazard for any soldier, but fear of the unknown. The Council had encountered aggressive species before, but nothing like this. "They don't fight like other species," he realized aloud. "Other races fight when they have to. Humans fight because that's what they are." The final part of the demonstration was almost casual. Admiral Chen simply asked, "Would you like to see our planet crackers?" A single human ship, larger than any of the Council vessels, moved into position near a small moon. The weapon it fired was visible this time. A beam of energy that seemed to tear reality itself apart. The moon didn't explode or melt or vaporize. It simply unraveled at the atomic level, its component particles spreading out in a pattern that looked almost artistic. "That was actually one of our older designs," Chen mentioned conversationally. "We've moved on to more efficient methods since then." "Much more efficient." Ambassador Velshan finally found her voice. "Admiral Chen, what do you want from us?" The pause that followed was longer than comfortable. When Chen finally spoke, her tone had shifted from casual to serious. "Want? We don't want anything from you, Ambassador. You came here with demands and threats. We're simply showing you what those threats look like from our perspective." Admiral Kethtar realized that everything had changed. The Council had come to intimidate a primitive species into submission. Instead, they had discovered a civilization that had been watching them for decades, had anticipated their arrival, and had prepared demonstrations that made Council military technology look like children's toys. "What happens now?" he asked. Admiral Chen's answer would echo through Council space for generations to come. "Now, Admiral, we talk." The conference room aboard Admiral Chen's flagship was unlike anything the Council representatives had ever seen. Where most military vessels had stark functional meeting spaces, this room felt more like a university lecture hall. Ancient human texts lined the walls alongside tactical displays showing star charts and weapon specifications. Admiral Kethtar sat across from Admiral Chen, trying to reconcile the woman before him with the demonstrations he had just witnessed. She appeared relaxed, almost casual, as if she hadn't just revealed technology that could reshape galactic civilization. Ambassador Velshan sat beside him, her diplomatic training warring with genuine curiosity about these impossible humans. "You seem confused," Chen observed, pouring herself a cup of something that smelled like burnt plants. "Would you like me to explain? I would appreciate understanding how a species with your technological capabilities allowed us to believe you were primitive," Velshan said carefully. Chen smiled, but there was something predatory in the expression, because you made assumptions based on incomplete data. You saw our surface conflicts and concluded we were savage. You observed our divided governments and assumed we were weak. You noticed our chemical rockets and decided we were technologically inferior. She activated a holographic display showing Earth from space. What you failed to understand is that humans have been preparing for contact with hostile alien species since we first realized we weren't alone in the universe. Every war we fought taught us something new. Every conflict pushed us to develop better technology, better tactics, better strategies. Admiral Kethtar leaned forward. But your planet showed massive military buildup, constant warfare between your own species. How does internal conflict prepare you for external threats? Chen's laugh was genuinely amused. Admiral, you're thinking like a peaceful species. Let me explain something about human nature that your council's analysts missed completely. The hologram changed to show images of human history. Battles, weapons, armies marching across ancient landscapes and modern battlefields alike. Humans don't fight wars to solve problems, Chen continued. We fight wars because conflict is how we evolve. Every major technological breakthrough in human history came from military research. Computers, advanced materials, space travel, communications technology, medical advances. War drives innovation faster than any other force. She paused to take a sip of her drink. Your species developed technology through cooperation and peaceful research. That's admirable, but it's also slow. Humans developed technology because if we didn't, we died. Natural selection applied to entire civilizations. Ambassador Velshan studied the historical data flowing across the displays. But surely this constant warfare hindered your development. Think of the resources wasted, the knowledge lost. You're still not understanding, Chen replied patiently. War didn't waste our resources. It multiplied them. Every conflict forced us to become more efficient, more creative, more adaptable. The pressure to survive and win pushed us to develop solutions that peaceful species would never consider. Admiral Kethtar was beginning to grasp the implications. You're saying that your species uses warfare as an evolutionary tool? Exactly. And not just biological evolution. Cultural evolution, technological evolution, strategic evolution. We've been refining the art of warfare for 10,000 years, Admiral. Every defeat taught us new lessons. Every victory showed us new possibilities. Chen activated another display, this one showing the weapons and technologies the humans had demonstrated earlier. The Singularity Lance was developed because kinetic weapons were too slow. Our cyber warfare capabilities exist because information is the ultimate weapon. Our stealth technology came from studying how predators hunt prey. She stood and walked to a wall display showing what appeared to be a family photograph. But here's what your analysis really missed. Humans didn't develop these capabilities to conquer other species. We developed them because we assumed that any species capable of interstellar travel would be hostile. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. You prepared for us, Velshan said quietly. We prepared for anyone like you, Chen corrected. Species with superior technology, united governments, and the arrogance to demand surrender from strangers. In human history, that kind of thinking usually leads to genocide. Admiral Kethtar felt a chill run down his spine. You thought we were coming to destroy you. We assumed the worst and prepared accordingly, Chen confirmed. It's kept us alive for millennia. Every time humans encountered a more powerful enemy, we found ways to level the playing field. Romans against Germanic tribes, Europeans against Native Americans, small nations against imperial powers. The pattern is always the same. The supposedly weaker force finds advantages the stronger one never considered. She returned to her seat, her expression becoming more serious. The council made a fundamental error in judgment. You assumed that a divided species would be weak, but division creates competition, and competition drives advancement. You thought our constant conflicts made us primitive, but those conflicts taught us things about warfare that peaceful species never learn. Chen activated a tactical display showing the current positions of human forces throughout the solar system. The council representatives stared in shock at the sheer number of installations, ships, and weapons platforms that had been invisible to their sensors. "How long have you been preparing?" Kethtar asked. "Since we detected your first hyperspace signatures 60 years ago," Chen replied matter-of-factly. "We've been tracking council ship movements ever since. We know your standard first contact protocols, your military capabilities, your political structure, and your weaknesses." Ambassador Velshan leaned back in her chair, overwhelmed. "You've been studying us for decades. Of course. Sun Tzu, one of our ancient military philosophers, said that if you know your enemy and know yourself, you need not fear the result of 100 battles. We made it our business to know everything about potential threats." Chen brought up another display, this one showing council military technology. "Your weapons are impressive by peaceful standards, but they're designed for intimidation rather than actual warfare. Your ships are built for exploration and diplomacy, not sustained combat. Your tactics assume that a show of force will end conflicts before they begin." She highlighted specific weaknesses in council ship designs, defensive systems, and strategic doctrine. "You've been so successful at peaceful expansion that you've forgotten how to fight against an enemy that doesn't want to surrender." Admiral Kethtar realized that everything he thought he knew about military strategy was being systematically dismantled by a species he had dismissed as primitive hours earlier. "What do you propose?" he asked. Chen's smile returned, but this time it seemed genuinely friendly rather than predatory. "That depends on what you came here to accomplish, Admiral. If you came to force us into submission, you've discovered that's not going to happen. If you came to invite us to join a peaceful galactic community, well, that's a conversation worth having." She gestured to the displays around them. "Humans are very good at warfare, Admiral, but we're also very good at choosing when not to fight. We prefer friends to enemies, trade to conquest, cooperation to conflict, but we will not be bullied or threatened by anyone, regardless of their technology or political influence." Ambassador Velshan found herself in completely uncharted diplomatic territory. What would human membership in the Galactic Council look like? "Partnership," Chen replied immediately. "Not as a junior member under council protection, but as an equal voice in galactic affairs. We bring unique capabilities to the table, including the ability to defend against threats that your peaceful species might not be prepared to handle." Admiral Kethtar was beginning to understand that the balance of power in the galaxy had just shifted dramatically. "What kind of threats?" Chen's expression grew darker. "Admiral, you've had peace for 2,000 years. That's admirable, but it's also dangerous. Peace makes species soft, complacent. What happens when you encounter something that doesn't want to talk, doesn't respond to diplomacy, doesn't care about your superior technology?" She brought up star charts showing the regions beyond council space. "The galaxy is vast and full of unknowns. Sooner or later, you're going to meet something that sees your peaceful civilization as easy prey. When that happens, you'll need allies who remember how to fight." The meeting continued for hours, but the fundamental relationship had already changed. The council had come to collect a primitive species. Instead, they had discovered partners who would reshape everything they thought they knew about galactic civilization. As the formal negotiations began, one thing was clear. Humanity was no longer asking for membership in the Galactic Council. They were offering it. 6 months after first contact, Ambassador Velshan found herself standing in the main plaza of the Earth Defense Force Academy, watching something that challenged everything she thought she understood about military species. Human children, some barely old enough to walk, played games that her tactical analyst had identified as advanced combat simulations. They laughed and cheered as they outmaneuvered imaginary enemies and planned elaborate strategies that would have impressed seasoned council military officers. "It's disturbing, isn't it?" Admiral Chen said, joining her at the observation deck overlooking the plaza. "I'm not sure that's the word I would use," Velshan replied carefully. "Your children seem remarkably strategic." Chen smiled as she watched a group of 10-year-olds execute a flanking maneuver that would have made Admiral Kethtar proud. "Humans learn warfare the same way we learn language. It's built into our culture from birth. But watch what happens next." As Velshan observed, the same children who had been enthusiastically planning mock battles moments before gathered around an injured bird that had fallen from a nearby tree. They worked together with gentle efficiency to splint its wing and find its shelter, showing the same level of coordination and care they had displayed in their war games. This is what your council's analysts never understood, Chen explained. The capacity for violence doesn't eliminate the capacity for compassion. In humans, they exist side by side. We can plan the most efficient way to destroy an enemy fleet in the morning and spend the afternoon teaching children to read. They walked through the academy grounds, past classrooms where young officers studied everything from advanced physics to ancient philosophy. In one room, students debated the ethics of warfare while simultaneously running tactical simulations. In another, they analyzed historical battles while discussing the humanitarian laws that governed modern conflict. Admiral Kethtar approached from across the courtyard, his forearms loaded with data tablets and looking more confused than Velshan had ever seen him. The proud Zelani military officer had spent the last 6 months trying to understand human military doctrine, and the experience had fundamentally challenged his worldview. "Admiral Chen," he said with the tone of someone who had been wrestling with impossible concepts, "I need to understand something. My tactical teams have analyzed your military history, and we keep encountering contradictions that make no logical sense." Chen gestured for them to sit at a nearby table. "What kind of contradictions?" "Your species has developed weapons capable of destroying entire planets. Yet you have elaborate rules about protecting civilians during conflicts. You study the most efficient methods of killing, yet you spend enormous resources trying to heal your enemies after defeating them. You prepare for total warfare while simultaneously working to prevent it." Kethtar spread his data tablets across the table, showing battle plans next to medical relief efforts, weapons specifications alongside peace treaties. "How do you reconcile these opposing forces?" "They're not opposing forces," Chen replied patiently. "They're complementary aspects of the same philosophy. Humans learned long ago that the most effective way to end a war is to be so prepared for it that no one wants to fight you. We became experts at violence so that we could choose peace from a position of strength." She pulled up a holographic display showing current human military deployments throughout Council space. Over the past months, human ships had taken positions in dozens of systems, not as conquerors but as protectors. "Look at what's happening now," Chen continued. "Human forces are working alongside Council fleets to patrol sectors that were previously considered too dangerous to explore. We're sharing our defensive technologies with species that need them. We're training Council officers in tactics they never needed before." Ambassador Velshan studied the deployment patterns with growing understanding. "You're not just joining the Council, you're reshaping it." "The galaxy has changed," Chen acknowledged. "Your peaceful expansion was possible because you hadn't encountered anything truly hostile yet. But long-range sensors are detecting things in the outer rim that should concern everyone. Species that don't respond to diplomatic contact, technology signatures that suggest aggressive military development, ships that attack Council vessels without provocation." Admiral Kethtar activated his own displays, showing reports from the frontier that had been troubling Council leadership for weeks. "The incidents in the Outer Veil, you think they're connected?" "I think you're about to discover that the galaxy is a much more dangerous place than you realized," Chen said seriously. "And when that happens, you'll be glad that humans spent so much time learning how to fight." The conversation was interrupted by an urgent communication from the Council chambers. High Chancellor Zextul's voice carried across the plaza with uncharacteristic strain. "All military commanders report to emergency session immediately. We have a situation developing in Sector 7 that requires immediate attention." As they made their way to the communication center, Velshan found herself reflecting on how much had changed since the Council's first contact with humanity. What had begun as a routine pacification mission had evolved into a complete restructuring of galactic defense policy. The emergency session revealed the scope of the crisis. An unknown force had attacked 3 Council worlds in the Outer Rim, using weapons that bypassed all known defensive systems. The attacks had been swift, brutal, and completely without warning. Millions of peaceful civilians had been killed or captured. "We've never encountered anything like this," admitted Admiral Morthak of the Granite People, his massive frame seeming diminished by the enormity of the threat. "Our defensive fleets were destroyed before they could even identify the attackers." Admiral Chen studied the tactical reports with the calm focus of someone who had spent a lifetime preparing for exactly this scenario. Pattern analysis suggests coordinated strikes by a species with advanced military technology and no interest in communication. Time between attacks indicates they're testing your response capabilities. Can your forces help? Asked High Chancellor Zexthul, the ancient energy being's voice carrying a note of desperation that would have been unthinkable months earlier. Our forces are already moving, Chen replied. Human rapid response fleets have been deployed to all threatened sectors. We're implementing defensive strategies that should buy us time to understand what we're facing. As the crisis unfolded over the following days, the true value of humanity's military expertise became clear. Where Council forces had been overwhelmed by the unknown enemy's tactics, human forces adapted and responded with strategies that turned the tide of battle. The turning point came when a human fleet intercepted one of the attacking forces and, instead of simply destroying them, managed to capture several enemy vessels intact. The intelligence gathered from those ships revealed the scope of the threat, an aggressive hive-mind species from beyond the galactic rim that viewed all other life forms as resources to be harvested. They've been watching Council space for centuries, Admiral Chen reported to an emergency session of the full Council. Building up their forces, studying our weaknesses, preparing for total conquest. They assumed that peaceful species would be easy prey. Ambassador Velshan felt a chill as she realized how close the Council had come to catastrophe. If we had never made contact with humanity, you would have been conquered within a year, Chen confirmed bluntly. Your military doctrine is designed for peacekeeping and intimidating primitive species. It's completely inadequate for fighting an enemy that wants to exterminate you. The war that followed lasted 3 years, and forever changed the nature of galactic civilization. Human tactical expertise, combined with Council resources and technology, proved capable of defeating even the most aggressive enemies. But the cost was the end of the era of peaceful expansion. When the final enemy stronghold fell, the Galactic Council had been transformed into something entirely new. A true military alliance capable of defending itself against any threat. Admiral Chen stood once again in the Earth Defense Force Academy, but now the plaza was filled with young officers from dozens of species, all learning the lessons that humanity had paid for with millennia of conflict. They studied strategy and tactics alongside ethics and philosophy, learning not just how to fight, but when to fight and why fighting was sometimes necessary. Was it worth it? Ambassador Velshan asked, joining her old friend at their usual observation point. Chen watched as a young Etherian officer helped a granite cadet understand a complex tactical concept, while a human child taught them both a game that looked suspiciously like military logistics training. Peace, without the ability to defend it, is just a pause between conquests, she replied. Now the Council has both. We've given the galaxy the tools to remain peaceful by being prepared for war. In the distance, human and Council ships patrolled together in formations that had become the new standard for galactic defense. The universe was still vast and dangerous, but for the first time in history, peaceful species had allies who remembered how to fight. The age of easy conquest was over. The age of defended peace had begun.